Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are bringing you this episode remotely from different places around the state. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the health issues and the impacts it was having on communities with the COVID-19 and how health departments were responding and how communities were banding together. But there is a larger picture in the economic health of the state and how it's being affected by this pandemic, and that is going to be our focus for today. We're going to start our conversations by looking at some of the policy and statistics and the background information behind it. We will be joined right now by Natalie Gochner, who is the head of the Gardner Institute at the University of Utah. Natalie, thanks for joining us, taking time from your mountainside lair where I see you're holed up safely. You put out a blog post at the Institute on the 6 economic rules to help Utah during a pandemic. And I thought I would just ask you about the inspiration and what you think the highlights of those points are.
You know, I worked at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services during the George W. Bush administration. I was there with our former governor, Mike Leavitt, when he was secretary. And it gave me, some insights into what pandemics are and what they mean. And I learned to follow the guidance of trusted sources. And I do think the CDC is a national treasure to this country. So one of the points was to follow, good sources of guidance. I also think it's really important, and our governor has stressed this, to stay engaged with the economy. We have limitations placed on us, but we need to do all we can to stay engaged, whether it's purchasing from local businesses, whether it's curbside dining, whether it's Venmoing people, paying for people, even though they're not providing services. Let's say if someone, does lawn care at your home or something. We just need to keep this economy functioning. And then the last thing I would say, there were other points, but I am so confident in Utah's core strengths. And whether it's our entrepreneurial spirit to get through something like this, whether it's our diverse economy, or whether it's our fiscal responsibility at the state and local level, those are all things that will help us succeed during this difficult time.
So do you think that we accomplished, we were in a much better place because we had like a 2.5 unemployment rate at the beginning of the year?
No question. I would say, and I feel some confidence about this, that Utah entered this public health and economic crisis as well positioned as any state in the country. Our unemployment rate was 2.5% as we went into mid-March. That's the lowest in our state's history. We have just come off 10 years of economic expansion. We have an unemployment insurance trust fund that's at record levels. We have a rainy day fund and some other funds that are also at very high levels. And so I think Utah's very well positioned to get through what is proving to be a very challenging circumstance.
There's some models that are showing unemployment nationally surging up to 32%. That came out of the St. Louis Fed with some sketches they did or some modeling they did. I'm not thinking it's actually going to go that high because I don't think that it addresses how we're coming off the peak of the pandemic and how things might get engaged. So do you foresee that tough of a time, or do you think Utah will fare better?
I don't know any other way to say it. It's really bad. In our state, I believe we were about 40,000 unemployed going into this. I think that's already surpassing 170,000. And we could get as high as 300,000 to 350,000 Utahns unemployed. But I will say that we have unemployment insurance that has been enhanced through the federal government's CARES Act. People are getting more funding. It is a safety net for us. And then just a reminder to viewers, listeners, that when you hear things like 35% unemployment or 25% unemployment, that's in a spike, in a peak. That's not an annual average number. So we think of unemployment, as a number during a year. What did we average? And so I expect over the course of the summer and into the fall that we will recover some of this and that our unemployment will be high in 2020, but not these numbers that you're hearing right now.
What do you think the survivability rate is? How many businesses are we going to lose to this across the state? And is there a difference between the rural economies and the Wasatch Front?
We are going to lose some businesses. There's just no way you can have this sort of disruption without it creating that difficulty. Interestingly, rural Utah is hit particularly hard for two main reasons. At the same time that we have this economic shock happening for a health reason, we have oil prices plummeting, natural resource prices plummeting. And that's very hard on the energy industry and on rural Utah. And then this is largely a tourism recession, in the sense that people stop traveling, people stop buying retail goods, and a lot of things that sustain our tourism and travel sector, discretionary spending, those sorts of things. And so I expect rural Utah to be definitely impacted.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time. I have many more questions, but we've got to move on to our next guest. Thank you so much for taking time with us. We're going to continue our conversation. When we come back, we'll meet with the head of Utah's Office of Economic Development, Val Hale. We'll continue with our economic look at COVID-19 on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the economic impacts of COVID-19. A couple of weeks ago, we addressed the issues of the health aspects of the pandemic. And joining us for this part of our conversation is the guy who knows all about economic development, the head of the Governor's Office of GOED, Val Hale. Val, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a difficult conversation at times, given the current situation, but appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
From your seat, how are we doing so far? As far as GOED, and I know you had a one and done bridge loan program that you ran out for a lot of people. Did that have a lot of takers? Did that help quite a bit?
In round one, we had about 2,700 people apply, and about 1,000 actually finished the application in time and were considered for the loan, and we were able to hand out about 502 loans. And we got checks out in the mail to those, and we opened up round two Monday, and it closes it closed, and we anticipate we'll have at least as many as we had last time. So probably between rounds 1 and 2, we're talking about 5,000 applicants, which is way more than what we can fund, but at least we know there's a tremendous amount of interest.
Is part of the pacing of that program just taking it in small doses so that you don't become overwhelmed?
Yeah, we decided to do it in 2 phases to give our people a chance to get their head above water and also to reassess and see if we needed to make changes. Phase 1 went very smoothly, actually. We had a few hiccups, but relatively few. And so we opened up round 2 as well for nonprofits. So they were able to apply, and it gave us a chance to catch our breath, to reevaluate, and then to plow into round 2. But we think it'll go just as smoothly, and we hope to have the checks out by the end of next week.
The governor's plan that is out there, Lead Together program, we're currently in the urgency phase. We're supposed to be rolling out of that somewhere between May 10th, end of May, and into stabilization. And that pretty much stretches out through the summer. How much will life change shifting from phase 1 to phase 2?
Well, I don't think people ought to view it as a flip of the switch that one day we're going to be in urgency and the next day we're going to be in recovery or back to normal. I think people like to refer to it as a rolling recovery. I've been seeing signs from the governor and the lieutenant governor, some comments here and there that they think that things are going better than expected. So we might be able to come out of this sooner than expected. And I would suspect you'll see some efforts to open up parts of the economy gradually and until we can eventually get through that, the phase, the transition phase, the stabilization phase, and make it to the recovery phase. But, this is going to be a several months process, but most people seem to think that we are in really good shape and we're making really good headway. We just can't let things go too soon, or we may have a recurrence. But the governor's intent on trying to help us get the economy back as soon as we can.
So there's some people, there's small businesses out there, I'm one of them, that are looking at this, and if it's protracted over a long period of time, even if you were managed to be one of the lucky ones that scored paycheck protection, you've got some lean months ahead. How much failure rate do you think we might be having in Utah businesses with an extended recovery?
Really hard to say, but there are those who are suffering and won't make it through. We just know that's going to happen. At the same time, there are those who are doing quite well. I was just on a call and listening to someone telling us about a restaurant in their area that said that March was their best month ever. So, go figure that. And so some businesses are really hurting and may not make it through. And other businesses, interestingly enough, are prospering because people are stepping up and going out and supporting them and trying to help in this difficult time.
One of the areas that I know GOED's involved in that a lot of people aren't thinking about is local governments, counties and cities. They might be in as much trouble as small businesses and very easily could be. I presume they're already seeing some revenue problems, particularly in areas of tourism and sales tax and business taxes and sort of things like that. Is there any part of the plan that addresses the municipalities and counties?
Well, I think the legislative session, the special session that is going to be called is probably going to address some of that. I also know that the federal government has come out with some money that is designed to help some of those government entities in this difficult time. You think about it, our cities and towns are really set up on sales tax, and that's how a lot of them get their revenue. And you mentioned tourism, TRT tax, transient room tax. That in some of our rural communities provides a huge part of their budget. And without tourists, how are they going to fund what they do? There was one hotel that was in southern Utah that said that a year ago right now they had 600 rooms full. Now they have 7 rooms full. So that shows you the impact. And you think about all the tax that's lost when those rooms sit empty. So you're right. I think our state, our local, county, and city entities are going to really be hurting by the lack of these taxes.
Last question. A lot of people panned the state of Utah for having such a big rainy day fund. Are we glad we have it now?
My personal philosophy is you can never have too much money in the bank, and hats off to our governor and to our legislature who have thought ahead and have been conservative and put that money away, because I would say it's raining now. It's a good thing we've got that in the bank.
At some places, it's even snowing, Val. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time with us to cover this angle of it. We'll continue. We're going to take a look at a county level when we come back on the county seat and find out how counties are engaging to help the businesses and residents of their communities. We'll be right back on the county seat. Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about the economic impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Joining us for this part of the conversation to look at how things are being approached at the county level, we have Shawn Milne, who is a Tooele County Commissioner, and Jess Clifford has joined the conversation, and Jared Hamner, who is with the Tooele Chamber of Commerce. So, Shawn, I want to go back and talk to you. Tooele County has really aggressively taken this bull by the horns. Tell me a little bit about what you've set up with your Wednesday online conferences.
Absolutely, and thank you for asking. Appreciate being part of the program. Well, like everybody in every community nationwide, really, but certainly here in Utah, our community was quickly affected by social distancing parameters and chief among those and earliest out of the gate was the hospitality industry. Dining establishments, hoteliers, large-scale events that with the warmer weather coming on were busily planning for their events, or it was coming up within just mere days or weeks, real quickly started to show some anxiety, understandably, and their employees about what this meant to them now that they were having to cancel events, some uncertainty even a couple of months out. Should they stop planning their events for early or midsummer? Dining establishments, dove overnight. One told me that because they had drive-through, they'd only suffered 30 or 40% drop year over year for the same week. But another that is not accustomed to drive-through or delivery, they're used to having folks dining in, they dropped as much as 95% overnight, just decimating their workforce, putting them into a tailspin that made them wonder, so what's going on? How do I pay my employees? And am I needing to think about shutting down my business? I mean, it was a stark reality. So together with other community leaders, after a few days of fielding phone calls and texts nonstop, decided, there's got to be a more efficient way to address the business community. And many of these folks were friends before I'd even gotten elected. So we convened like so many others did and immediately went to an online platform. And so digitally got folks together. Our platform of choice happens to be Zoom conference calls, and it's worked really well. It's been intuitive for a lot of folks that are not accustomed to adapting to this kind of technology, and certainly not overnight. We've brought businesses and professionals together. It started off with, and has maintained since, we begin each program with an update from our local health officer with the Tooele County Health Department, our emergency management director, and the first meetings involved Utah Tourism Industry Association policy director and lobbyists, Restaurant Association, and the like. And Chad, we brought folks together with knowledge and said, hey, let's help fix this for these folks. That's how it got started.
I'd like to ask Jess a question. It seems like the biggest thing people are worried about is meeting payroll and keeping their businesses sustained. And then, of course, with the president coming out and promoting the CARES program through the Department of Treasury, that gave people a lot of hope, but it's had a lot of complications. Can you address some of the big questions that you're seeing?
We have to understand one thing. The government is doing everything they can to get money to us to address that issue. It's a very important issue for business, but it's not the only issue. And so when approaching banks, we have to realize, especially with the PPP or the Payroll Protection Program that came through the CARES Act, that is administered through banks. And it's important that people understand that that's a product that is being backed by the SBA or guaranteed, but it is coming out of bank portfolio funds. And so when approaching the bank, I see a lot of people getting frustrated. They walk into their bank and they feel like they're talking to the government. And they feel like they can go in and demand services and so forth. They don't realize that they're talking to a private industry lender who's risking their own portfolio, notwithstanding the fact that it's backed by the government. And so it's important to realize that when we talk with banks, we need to be professional. We need to be courteous. We need to realize that they're dealing with the best they can as well. And it's easy when you feel like you're in line at the DMV to just get frustrated. And my experience with a lot of businesses that I've spoken with is that they're getting hung up on, they're getting short comments, things like this. And it's just important to remember who we're talking to and what risk they're actually looking at when we apply for these programs.
What is the difference between the emergency impact loans and the payroll protection plan?
Okay, the payroll protection plan, or the PPP, is done through your bank or a private lender, and it is backed by the the SBA, and it is guaranteed. The EIDL, or the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan, is directly with the SBA, so you're literally taking out a loan with the government.
Part of PPP is forgivable if you do the right things.
That's correct.
And the other one is long-term low interest.
Right. Anything in payroll, rent, utilities, or other specified fixed costs at the end of an 8-week period from the time you're funded becomes forgivable as a grant. Any balance left over falls to the terms of the loan.
Okay, excellent. So, Jared, I want to talk to you about some of the innovative things that the county's done.
So, as you mentioned, what a catastrophic event this has caused. When the governor came out and first spoke about the COVA, we had a business that closed their doors. This 2 days after that, it closed their doors. So as a chamber, the leader in the business community, listen, if we don't have businesses, we don't have cities, and we don't have the county that has any money for payroll or any other action. So it's critical, absolutely critical, that our businesses receive the help and attention. And so the chamber took a forward way of thinking and said, why don't we, some of our businesses and eateries that are the hardest affected right now, and they don't have drive-throughs, we thought outside the box and approached a few different people and said, why can't we have a landing page, a website where there's a landing page that has all the restaurants on there, and where we can obviously put their menus so people within the comfort of their own homes can order what they would like, and then have a curbside pickup or have it delivered there, and have all the restaurants that are on that website. Obviously, that takes some money. When we went and presented it immediately to Tooele City, they jumped on board and said, we will fund the marketing. Help us to get that out.
So how are some of the businesses like redirecting their workforce? Have you had any suggestions for that?
Shawn kind of mentioned at the very beginning that we had some of those restaurants that have drive-through, so they're all on drive-through. But certainly the workforce is down. I just talked to a restaurant owner today that he gets between 15 to 20 phone calls from his employees saying, hey, can we work? And so he's finding different avenues to get those employees to work, whether it's curbside or deliveries, where they never had it before. And so then now they're coming up with the delivery, which changes a variety of different things. Their insurance policy when they're on the road. And so they're making some changes there, and quick changes, because this thing came at us like a freight train without a lot of warning.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about it. Great work your county is doing, an inspiration to other counties. I'm sure that any one of you would take inquiries from other counties around the state if they want to know how to set this up, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, we're all learning to compromise, think outside the box, and navigate our way through it. And of course, whatever we think we have figured out today will most likely be different next week. Hang in there, everybody, and we'll see you next week on the County Seat. Thank you for watching the County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.